Hi friends, welcome to my first ever vlog. So this is my first time trying out vlogging. I don't know how it's gonna go. This is my intro clip to it. So I just got back home from the Rachel Harrison event at the bookstore that I went to, and it was so much fun. It was so amazing. I just feel like so grateful that I got to have that experience. So at this event, there was like a gorgeous setup. Like this bookstore has a really nice like upper level, and there were just like all these chairs, and there was like a little stage area, and it was just like a very cozy setting. It was like very well lit. And basically, what they did was for the first hour, there was a conversation between Rachel Harrison and Emily C. Hughes. And Emily C. Hughes wrote Horror for Weenies. So she was basically interviewing Rachel Harrison, but it was kind of just like nice seeing them have like a back and forth exchange. They were both really cool and really funny. It was just like very engaging. It went by so fast, and I can barely like remember every single snippet. I try to like take some notes when they were making like book or movie recommendations and things like that, and just hearing about their writing process and all these things. And during the Q&A, people asked really great questions. So it was just awesome. And I was really lucky because I got there early enough where I sat in the first row behind the reserved row. And when it was time to get up to get the book signed, they were just releasing people row by row. So because I was in that first row, I was one of the first people to get my book signed by Rachel Harrison. It was so amazing. And she was just like so nice. I had some anxiety about it because I was just kind of like, you know how you hear about like horror stories of people meeting their heroes, and like sometimes it can be like such a disappointment or a letdown. But it was not that way at all. She was like super nice because I was just, being my usual cringe self. And they said like you could bring all of your books up because I had brought my whole collection just in case because I wasn't really sure. But they were like, yeah, she'll sign as many books as you have of hers. Totally fine. So I like plopped down. I'll show you like my whole collection. And I was like, I'm your number one fan. And she was like, you totally are, because she's well aware like this book has only been published in the UK. So I'm a real one, I guess. But it was really fun, and I got my picture taken with her. And then there was still like time remaining because everybody else was lining up. So I ran downstairs and I bought Emily's book, Horror for Weenies, and came back upstairs and she signed it for me. So it says, "To Amy, Weenies Forever." So that's really cool. Because she was at the Framingham event that I went to, but this just wasn't on my radar at the time because I was like, well, it's nonfiction and I already like have seen most of these movies. So I was like, not saying like what is the point, but like I already like to me like I already watched these things and I wouldn't classify myself as a weenie. But when they were talking, like Rachel was like commenting about her book as well, and I realized like, oh, like this is actually not just about like giving people a basic synopsis for people who are like afraid of horror, but they're just like more in-depth, really funny movie analyses. So woo, okay. So I just had a coughing fit that I just edited out, hopefully. So yeah, I am looking forward to reading Horror for Weenies and just hearing all the funny, interesting insights that she has about the books. I mean, the movie, so that'll be cool. And then I love that Rachel like signed and wrote little different things in my book. So in Bad Dolls, she wrote, "It's good to be bad." And then in Such Sharp Teeth, I think she wrote, yep, "Be Wild." And then in Cackle, she wrote, "Your Real Magic." And then in The Return, I think she wrote like, yep, "Best Friends Forever." Oh, and then in Black Sheep, she just has this like little symbol in there. So that was fun. And then for So Thirsty, what do we got? Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to read this. I started reading it. It just says Cheers, XX. But it's great, like, listening to her talk about this book. She did a reading of a passage in it from a particular scene later on. Oh my gosh, it was so funny and just so great. I just know I'm going to love this one. I love all her books. And she did mention that she's already has one that she's editing right now, and hopefully she'll have another book out this time next year. I'm really excited about that. She mentioned that it's probably going to be like a possession house story about a pair of sisters. Like, I love when she writes about family dynamics, so I'm so excited. Yeah, and look, I mean, just the details, man. Like, look at that. The black and the red. So vampiric. But yeah, so I already started reading this when I was waiting for the event to start. So just got through chapter 1. So basically, we're starting off with our main character, Sloane, and she is about to celebrate her 36th birthday. And she doesn't really like surprises, but her husband, Joel, surprises her and lets her know, oh yeah, I booked you this cottage getaway for a couple of days with your best friend, Naomi. And she thought Naomi was like traveling abroad or whatever, but they had been planning this for like months and months and didn't say anything. And she's not really sure how she feels about that yet. Like, on the one hand, it's like, yes, she's looking forward to seeing her friend, but she's kind of like not sure about that at the same time. So that's really all I got from the first chapter. I don't really have a good grasp yet about like what her backstory is, or what her relationship with Naomi is like, or what her relationship with her husband is like. But obviously I'm curious to read more. It's going to be awesome. It's a vampire story. What's not to love? The cover is gorgeous. So yeah, I mean, what a great night. Like, I just feel so lucky that she's a local author and that I was able to meet her and just listen to her talk. I love to go to these kind of events and just nerd out. And now tomorrow I have a personal day so that I'm actually going to get up early. I'm not even going to sleep in. I could, but I find that I don't know, my body's used to just getting up at 5 in the morning now every day anyway. So I'm just going to get an early start to the morning, because I'm going to see, do you think that I can finish this in like 24 hours? That would be really cool. I probably won't. Like, I'm not going to put pressure on myself to do that. But I do have an open house event at work on Thursday. And I live too far away from where I work. It doesn't make sense for me to come home after school and go back. So I'll just be there all afternoon anyway. So I'll probably bring this if I haven't finished it by then, because I'll have like a couple hours to kill. I mean, I'll probably do some work too, but that'll be nice. So I'll definitely have this book read over the course of a couple days. And yeah, I'll just be popping in and out and letting you know what I'm thinking about throughout the reading experience, and maybe showing you some other ways that I spend my personal day tomorrow. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. And thanks for watching. Good morning, everyone. It's a little after 8 a.m. and I have been up since 5 a.m. I already showed some of the footage of me reading this morning, and I read for about an hour and a half total. And then, I was interacting with my family while they were getting ready for school and work. And I made breakfast and tried to vlog that, and for some reason I did a horrible job, and only in terms of the fact that it didn't actually record what I wanted it to record. So hopefully I can learn from that experience when I go to make a nice warm beverage later that I want to show you about. But I'm 50 pages into the book, probably a little more than 50 pages in. Yeah. So I've read 7 chapters so far, and I love it. I knew that I would, but I just want to, kind of give some thoughts maybe like every 50 pages or so without really going into spoiler territory and things like that. So in this story, we have our main character, Sloane, and she is going on a birthday getaway with her best friend, Naomi, that Naomi and Sloane's husband have set up for the two of them to go on. And as we're discovering here, like, Sloane is a very interesting character. I find her to be very relatable. And that's what I love about all of Rachel Harrison's books, is that even though the characters are very distinctly different in a lot of ways, there's a similar tone, and there's just always something that the character is grappling with thematically. So even if you can't relate to the actual situation that she's in, and I'm not talking about like the horror elements and the fact that there's going to be vampires in this, I mean like what's going on in her like personal life or real life, like even if you've never experienced those kind of things, there are other aspects of our lives that we can definitely connect to the characters in any Rachel Harrison book. And what Sloane is particularly grappling with that I find very compelling and relatable at this point is that she's sort of the kind of person that lets things sort of happen to her. I wouldn't say that she like plays a victim, like that's not really like the attitude or the expression, but more like this book is exploring if you are a person who wants to mitigate risk. So Sloane is not a risk taker at all. She's a very practical person, and I can relate to that as well. So when I make decisions, much like Sloane, like I'm trying to think about like, what are the consequences to either decision that I make, and what can I actually live with? And in being that kind of person, as Sloane is showing here, like, you kind of lose your sense of agency a little bit with that. You tend to feel a little bit more resigned in your life. And like she'll admit, like her life isn't like that bad, but it's not really great either, because it's not quite how she wanted it to turn out, but she feels like she kind of can't turn back now. She's kind of feeling a little bit stuck and blasé about her life at this point. And she just is the type of person that has a lot of anxiety about things, kind of thinks about worst case scenarios, whereas her best friend Naomi is sort of that life of the party character, doesn't really seem to be anxious about anything, kind of does things on a whim, is just very vibrant. And at the same time, like Naomi has her own struggles too. So she's got an issue in her life that she's kind of dealing with at the same time that Sloane is dealing with some things in her life. So they're very different, but they balance each other out. And I love how realistic their friendship is in a lot of ways. I love the way Rachel Harrison writes about female friendship. She's just such a pro at it. The dialogue is always so funny and engaging. And even if there's not a lot of action happening in those scenes, because I was paying attention to this today, there's like a lot of just like hanging out, like either hanging out in their hotel room talking, or they're out to dinner having a conversation. But those conversations are like so rich and just so funny and so humorous. And even the details of the mundane experiences, they're so specific about what they're eating, the sensory details around them, that you feel like fully immersed, and you feel like, oh yeah, like this is a scene that I could see myself in, and had similar situations with. But at the same time, while she has all this humor in her books, just like in this one, she kind of slowly weaves in these like horror-like elements. Like, we're only 50 pages in, it's not scary yet, but there are these little incidents that happen that let you know like, oh, this is gonna head in like a really weird, creepy direction. So I love that. What else do I love? I love the way she weaves in metaphors. She talked about this last night about how she comes up with her ideas because she doesn't just think about like the creature she wants to write about. So she's written about a vampire now. She's written about werewolves. She's written about a witch. It's not about that character archetype, but about what life lesson or theme or aspect of our day to day life that kind of matches that as a metaphor that she wants to explore. So, with Such Sharp Teeth, she was exploring like trauma and our control or lack thereof of our bodies. So far in So Thirsty, what she's building up is we've got vampires, which have not made an appearance quite yet in the book, but we've got themes of aging, we've got themes of beauty, we've got themes of like desire and going after what we want versus not going after what we want. This idea of like being satiated in some way. And that actually makes me think of like all of the scenes that she's had so far in just talking about food, like even though it's not, she's not being overt about it. Now that I'm thinking about that, I'm like, oh, that really actually weaves in nicely as well. She just does these things, and I know she's like a hard worker for sure, but she just ties all of these metaphors, these images, these themes together like so beautifully that it comes across as effortless and you're just fully immersed. And I really love that about her writing. So I'm going to get back to it now, and I will see you in another 50 pages. Hi everyone, I'm back again, and it is just about noon. I am up to page 125. I've actually taken a really long break because I have been editing this footage as I go. It's been taking an hour to do all of this so far, mostly just because this isn't really the right computer for it, and I have not the best equipment, so that's pretty much why. But I'm just gonna keep plowing through, and I'm hoping to get another 100 pages in or so before I have to pick up my kids from school, so that would be cool. But yeah, I thought I'd come back like every 50 pages or so, but then I couldn't put the book down after page 100. Things really started picking up even faster, and I was like totally invested, so I had to actually make myself stop because I want to have, some consistent check-ins throughout. But yeah, I love this book so much. In fact, just the way it's going right now, this might actually probably be my favorite of hers. So it's kind of reminiscent a little bit of Annie's character in a way from Cackle. If she was older and had like a little bit more life experience, and she hadn't moved to the place that she had moved to and had her own story there. Just, Sloane has kind of come to this place where she's really just kind of resigned to her fate at this point, and she has a lot of like self-blame for why she is where she is in life. And I really just appreciated like a lot of the themes that she's weaving into this book. So now at this point, they've gone to this party, and things just get wild at this party. I'll just say that. So this is a much, she's really turned up the volume in terms of spice and horror in this book. So if you've read her other stuff, she really kind of amps it up a little bit more here. Because usually I find she has like a slow build to the horror, but we're about halfway in, not even, and this is definitely has more horror elements to it than her previous books. And her other books weren't spicy at all. This one, it's not like as spicy as like How to Kill Men and Get Away with It by Katie Brent, but this one has a little bit of a kick to it. And yeah, I just really like this main character. Like, I feel Sloane is like very smart, actually. I feel like she plays it safe, and yes, to her detriment, but I think it's kind of crucial to her character, and she's a very curious person. So I really like this conversation that she has with this person on page 77. And I don't write in my books. I know some people do, but I don't know. I feel weird about that. So I've just been kind of, you know, writing down when something really captures my attention. Like a lot has actually, but um, they kind of have this conversation about cowardice and being brave, and he's asking her like how brave she is, and he says, you admit to being a coward? And she says, not being brave and being a coward are two different things. I say, how so? I think for a moment. He passes me the cigarette again, and this time I inhale, welcome the poison into my lungs. I wash it down with gin. I haven't smoked a cigarette since I was 20. Cowardice is selfish, I say. It's an active choice to do the wrong thing. Not being brave, it's passivity. No one suffers but you. You suffer? No, I say. Well, we're off topic. You were warning me? And I really like that. I think it's because it's very timely for me, because I was actually having a conversation with someone recently in my life about how a lot of people will look at me and tell me that they think I'm really brave because I always try new things, and I do things at my age that other people feel like is really stepping out of a comfort zone. But I actually feel like I'm the least brave person I know. I really relate to Sloane's character because sometimes you get into a point in life, and actually I really like that they weave in some of her like teenage experiences, which you get a lot of backstory in these like next set of 100 pages that explain like how she became the person that she is currently. And it just kind of shows how when you're a teenager, life is full of possibilities and openings, and you can kind of make mistakes, but those mistakes kind of shape you. And then you get to a point when you're older and you feel like doors are kind of closing, or there's not as many opportunities, or you feel like you can't change anything because you're kind of locked into your situation. And sometimes you just feel like you work so hard to kind of protect yourself and keep yourself safe in this life, but you come to a point where you realize that that is sort of like a prison of your own making. So kind of showing this like almost like the spectrum of like not wanting to be like too wild and too chaotic and too YOLO, but at the same time, you don't want to play life too safe to the point where you don't really live. And there's like a lot of conversation in this book about life versus death, and what does it really mean to be alive? What does it mean to really live? And I just find that all so interesting. Trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to say here. Oh, yeah. And then once again, I feel like this is a similar theme that I've seen woven throughout her books continuously, is this idea of like, how do we know when to trust ourselves? Like, when do we acknowledge that we're seeing red flags versus when do we just kind of jump in and take a risk at something? Because Sloane has really good instincts, actually, and she picks up on when things aren't right. But she's in this space where, like, does she just like throw her hands up and be like, whatever, I'm just gonna go with this? Or does she stay on the same track she's been on, where she just keeps like playing it safe? But she is right, like, the situation she's in is like really sketchy. So I just like that there's that continuity of themes across her works, of this idea of like being a woman in touch with your intuition, but having a lot of like self doubt, and issues with self trust, because I just feel like that's totally relatable. So I'm going to jump back in and read some more. Good morning, everyone. It is now Saturday morning. I know all of my footage was from Wednesday, so we have quite a gap here, but I did actually finish the book on Wednesday night when I was at my son's football practice. But after I finished reading it, I was feeling really emotional, and I just wanted to really settle in my thoughts before I gave my final thoughts. And I end up just going home and working on editing the footage that I already have. And then the next day I was at work from, got there probably at 7:15 in the morning, and I didn't get home until 8 o'clock at night because it was open house. And I actually brought the book with me. I thought during my after school break between those things that I'd be able to do this, but I ended up working from 1:40 till open house, just cranking out things on my to-do list because a teacher's job is pretty much never ending. So I didn't get around to it then. And then yesterday I was exhausted, so I just pretty much vegged out. I what did I do? I played a lot of Fortnite, and I watched the 1961 film Homicidal, which I had never seen before, but it was kind of compared to Psycho, and that's one of my favorite movies. Um, so I watched that, and then I read some, and then I went to bed. So here I am now at almost 6:30 in the morning, ready to talk to you about so thirsty. Okay, first of all, this is my favorite book of the year that I've read so far, and I have read definitely somewhere between, I want to say 60 and 70 books. I'd have to look at my list, I track them. But I would also say that this book is one of my favorites of all time. Definitely in my top 3 of all time. This book was amazing. So I definitely finished it Wednesday because I couldn't put it down at all. So it was great all the way through, but the action really speeds up around page 60. But then from page 180, where I picked up from, all the way to the end, it was just so fast paced, and I just felt so invested in what was happening with Naomi and with Sloane and their friendship and what was going on. It was really wild because this isn't this vampire story isn't like Twilight, let's say, or even what we think of traditional vampires. She definitely plays around in with some of those elements. So this was a lot more violent and intense, for sure. And just the hijinks that they got into and all this stuff, I was really concerned. As we started nearing the ending, I don't know, I felt my heart rate was going up. I was really starting to get worried. I'm what direction is this going in? And starting to think am I gonna be really upset with Rachel Harrison? And then no, things went in a different turn, and the ending was even better than I would have thought that it could be. I was just I was so happy. So it was amazing because at the end of the day, this is really the heart of the story is this friendship between these two women, and with the fact that they're both very different in the way that they deal with life, basically. And they both intensely love each other, but it's really hard sometimes when you're going through traumatic events, and you and the person that you care about, you show up for those events in very different ways, and it can cause a lot of conflicts, obviously. So I was worried about how all that was going to turn out. And then on the other hand, it's really just a story of personal transformation, which I think is great because it lines up nicely with that metaphor of vampirism and transforming into a vampire and all these things. So I think I just felt emotional on Wednesday after reading it because it so like deeply resonated with me, even though obviously like I am not a vampire. I haven't even been in the same um, I haven't had the same relationship experiences that either character has had romantically. But there is still like, I think everybody can kind of relate to feeling like there might be something that, or an area of your life that didn't quite turn out the way that you had hoped it would or expected that it would. And sometimes, especially as you get older, because I'm just a little bit older than Sloane in this character, you feel like it's harder to turn things around and like make a change, because making big changes in the middle of your life is really really scary, because when you're young, like you're starting off kind of at the bottom anyway. Like not everybody, but like for the most part, like kids right out of college kind of start off entry level. I'm sure like that's not the case for everybody, but it was the case for me. And you're just kind of building up your life. But then you get to a point where like you kind of need to sustain your life. And let's say like there's an aspect that you're not happy with. Like if you have to make a big change, you're starting over like day one again. And that can be really scary and really difficult. So just seeing these characters and how they have to deal with when life takes over and makes that decision for you. Now you have to adapt. Like you don't even get the choice anymore. Like how are you going to respond to that? And just watching these characters be forced to like confront all of their fears and start over and make a new life for themselves. I don't know, I just felt it, the whole thing was really compelling. um I want to read it again. I really feel like I'm just gonna keep reading all of her books like every year. They're comfort reads to me. And yeah, that's really all I want to say. I hope everyone gives this book a shot. I will say it's definitely much more horrific than her other books in terms of like there's a lot more violence in them, like graphic violence described. It's not anything like unmanageable. I mean, I've read way more gorier books with a whole bunch of intense body horror. So this didn't feel like overwhelming to me or like way too much. But I don't know, like, if you're a weenie, as Emily C. Hughes would say. I don't know, but I still like really recommend this book just because it's fantastic and the characters are great, and it was just really fun, and I like all the things that Rachel Harrison has to say. So I can't wait for her next book. And if you do give this book a shot, like let me know what you thought. And yeah, so if you made it this far, I don't know if there's like a vampire emoji, leave it in the comments, and I will see you next time. Thanks.